board. We have 8 action items and 2 discussion items. The first one up is the acceptance of the March 6, 2019 Community Development Committee minutes. Bertha?
Are there any questions, concerns, changes?
Next item is the update to the tree plan. Laura Smith.
Yes, so per Chapter 230 of our Mission Municipal Code, we do, Parks Recreation Tree Commission is responsible for completing a tree plan and reviewing. It's also one of the requirements under our Tree City USA designation that we have a tree plan identified. And the ordinance speaks to updating or reviewing that in even numbered years. It got lost in the shuffle, in 2018, so we are bringing it forward now with some minor changes, and then we would anticipate reviewing it again in 2020 and getting it back on its even numbered years schedule. So I think you'll see the biggest changes in the tree plan this year were really carryovers from the 2017 merger of the Parks Board and the Tree Board to create the Parks Recreation and Tree Commission. I think that was about it in terms of substantive changes in how we interface with a variety of, whether it's governing body, staff, the landscape, or the community.
I would love to see that on the consent agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, is there any reason that for adding KDOT interface to this or no?
I think that's one of those things that we can talk about. I don't know where, let me go back and look at that and see where it would fit. I know we talked about that on Saturday at the retreat, but.
Well, I was looking for something KDOT that has to do with it, and I didn't see anything relevant that they have in terms of their policies. So.
Yeah, I don't think so. But we can look at, if you want to send me kind of what you would think that might look like, that will give us kind of a better starting point of how we might think about crafting something there.
Okay.
Any other questions for Laura? So we're taking it to council on the consent?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Next item is the Olsson task order, engineering for 2019 Lamar UBAS treatment. Mr. Morton.
Thank you. So, this is a staff recommendation for a UBAS treatment from Lamar from Foxridge to Shawnee Mission Parkway. An engineering service contract with Olsson, not to exceed $26,953. This was originally anticipated in the CIP for this year. The CARS funding has changed a little bit, and they are now accepting UBAS projects because there's a small mill part that comes off the top layer of the asphalt, which brings those projects into the CARS funding with a 50% match. So this project has been moved, or anticipated to be moved to 2020 for CARS funding with a 50% match on construction and construction costs. Okay. The available budget right now is $555,848. There's also Safe Routes to School money for bike lanes from Foxridge to Johnson Drive, and then past Johnson Drive will be Sharrows because there's not enough room for bike lanes on the 3-lane striping. So you'll be adding bike lanes to that. That is a $68,000 funding that is not available in 2019 and will be available in 2020 also with this project, hopefully. So we're working on that funding right now. To ensure all this stuff's built to specification, it's crucial that we have a design plan, standard detail sheets, general layout of the project. There'll be spot curb repair, some ADA ramp improvements on 51st Street by the school zone. There will also be some under drain installed by Quick Trip that I'm sure you've all seen that patch down there. It just keeps failing from the water coming up through. And some of the stuff we're running into there is with all the underground boring, they are hitting water springs as they're back reaming the holes, which is bringing that water to the top of the surface. So there's more under drain systems that are having to be installed now as all that underground boring work's going on. So They'll get that stuff tied into the storm box. There'll be some box top replacements. And with CARS funding, the project cost has gone up, estimated cost, but with the 50% funding, we'll get a lot more curb and sidewalk done with this project. Because we really don't know where in the future this is going to be a full depth reconstruction project. So, I mean, it could be 5 or 10 years out. So the more we can do with CARS funding and get that pavement, sidewalks, and curb in better condition, you know, the better off we'll be with not knowing how far out we are with, you know, stormwater work and full depth reconstruction or mill and overlay. And then when you get into the mill and overlay piece with the 2-inch mill and overlay, that requires federal that you make all the ADA improvements to that road. So that drastically ups the cost too. So the UBAS treatment, it's more of a surface treatment. So you do what you can on ADA improvements, but you don't have to do everything, so it can save you some money. So.
Any questions for that?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, did we apply for the safe routes for 2019 and it just wasn't available?
So it kind of got passed down a little bit and kind of missed, and it's almost a 2-year application process. So as some staff left, it kind of got, you know, missed a little bit, so we're trying to jump back on that, and it looks like it's going to be a 2020 funding. So moving it to a CARS funded project, and we'll be able to tie those funds in hopefully, so hopefully it'll save some money and we can get some more, you know, curb and sidewalk and get the striping all done at the same time.
Okay, and we feel good about the likelihood of getting that as well as the CARS funding?
We do.
Okay, good. What do you think the timeline in 2020? I'm excited
So,
for Lamar.
The reason why I wanted to keep the design still this year is so we can get a design, we can get, you know, drawings and where everything's happening, and I can push it out the door first thing next year. So as soon as the weather turns, we can have it on the list and get this rolling. And one more piece, there is some full depth patching that needs to be done on Lamar on the cracks, and it gives the ability for the public works crews to do some of that full depth patching to save some money on that end to get that, bring that street up to where we'll take a UBAS treatment next year.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's been fantastic. Any other questions?
Move it on consent.
I'd be good with that.
Consent? All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Brent, you're up again. 51st Street and Lamar traffic signal repairs.
So we talked about this at the last meeting. It was a discussion item. The signal at 51st and Lamar has been in recall mode for almost 6 months now due to the loops being broken, pavement condition not being, I mean, it's fixable, but every time you fix it, you cut the loops out with the mill head. So we're recommending, or staff's recommending, adding a camera system to that traffic signal, which will be overhead, which will give us the ability to fix that pavement whenever it's going bad. And also with the UBAS treatment coming in 2020, if there's any milling or anything done down there, you're not worried about cutting loops again or anything like that. So with the ADA ramps and everything like that. It is an increase in cost from, we were paying $214.36 a month right now. It jumps the cost to $855.41 a month, with an annual cost increase to our traffic signal budget, $10,264.92. The estimated cost, if we had to rebuild that intersection, full depth reconstruction, kind of fix the stormwater, and you know, you'd be into the ADA improvements also. It's probably around $140,000. That's just an approximate estimate. But this will add, I mean, you won't have any issues with people. I mean, people are calling down at least 3 or 4 a week right now, you know, because the traffic signal's just on rotation. So I think it's a good thing, and we'll be able to keep that intersection in a better condition for everybody. And it's also a school zone. I mean, the kids are always walking there, so if we can bring that all up to a better standard, I think it's good. So.
What are we doing with the pavement that keeps failing?
So, I mean, it's old pavement. 51st Street's not in good shape each way. It's shallow, but every time you cut those loops in, you're cutting slits in the road, so you're getting water into the road base, and it's just failing in those areas. And I mean, it's probably part of a full depth reconstruction at some point, at least that part of the road. But it gives us the ability to go in there and mill it 4 to 2 inches and get it put back right. And if it does break apart again with the subgrade being bad, we can go in there and fix it, and we're not cutting them loops out each time. I couldn't get a solid price from KCP&L on cutting in loops, but all they could tell me it's not a cheap process each time. And we've done it twice already, and they failed each time. So.
What's the date for full depth reconstruction?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just.
Do we have a timeline for that?
No, I mean, we're working through that stuff with the core sampling and trying to figure out, you know, with the inventory where all that stuff's at right now, so. I wouldn't say it's in the near future where we're gonna get to 51st Street for full depth reconstruction or stormwater stuff, so it's kind of in the patching and maintenance stage right now.
Okay, and the stormwater issue could be at some point defined under this map if we got.
I will know more about that tomorrow.
And then that's a full depth, or that's a car's eligible roadway as well?
No,
It's
from,
Not 51st Street is not.
51st is not, okay.
it is, I think, from 51st to Foxridge.
Yes, but not that section.
Not that section.
Not that section.
Not that section.
From Lamar to Foxridge?
Yes, yes, on 51st.
Recommend that we move this. So I've got a question. What did you say, the $140,000 would?
That'd be rebuilding the intersection, you know, going full depth reconstruction, 10 inches of asphalt, fly ash subgrade, and then you'd have the road base where you could cut loops in and you wouldn't be getting into the subgrade. They'd just be getting like 6 inches down into the asphalt.
Right.
But right now, when you're cutting it in, you're getting into the road base where you're allowing water to get in there, and they just keep failing, and the pavement's just falling apart on us.
So eventually that's gonna have to be, that road's gonna have to be repaired anyway.
At some point, but I would say that's more when we get into the full reconstruction of Lamar, when we can tie that in with some CARS funding, like.
Well, I'm just looking at, like, in 14 years, you're gonna spend that $140,000, just giving it KCP&L for the extra cost of the traffic signals and stuff, you know. So, I don't know, it seems to me like there's.
Is there an option for us to buy that light and use, and a radar, not part of like KCP&L, but
So it would be, you probably could buy the light, but they charge you the lifespan to that light when you buy it out, which is probably on their standards, probably 20 years. So you'd probably be into it $300,000 or $400,000 by the time you bought it. And it wouldn't be worth upgrading. If we owned it, I don't think it would be a new install of the traffic signal you want to do. You just upgrade the whole system if you bought the traffic signal outright.
I mean, we can investigate that price. If you want to defer another month, we can certainly look at what it would cost us to buy that signal.
You'd have to buy it through KCP&L?
That's, yeah, they own it now, so we would have to buy it from them. And then look at that. I mean, I think, you know, the challenge is, and Lamar,
Even rebuilding the area and replacing the loops, whatever, because you're gonna do a full depth rebuild in there. So we'd still be leasing the light from them, but you're replacing those loops, so it'd be $800 and some less a month, right?
Correct.
So you spend $140,000, but in year 15, you're making money on it. And I know there's gonna be other full depth construction done, maybe 8 years down the road or something. I'm just saying, we ought to consider maybe redoing the whole thing instead of.
And another way to look at it, if we tied that into a total reconstruction project from, you know, Foxridge to Johnson Drive on Lamar, that's probably when we'd anticipate buying that traffic signal and taking it over, and then, you know, replacing it with a brand new one in that project. Kind of like we did with Johnson Drive and Broadmoor and, you know, Woodson. So that's probably when we'd anticipate buying that traffic signal, and then that $850 a month would go away at that point, and we'd own it, and we'd just be updating the whole system that's ours.
Yeah, that's true.
well, maybe
6 or 8 years
months
now.
ago, we don't know what the cost of buying it would be, right? That's the,
Yeah, I don't know what that would be, but I mean, it's in our best interest when we go through there and fully reconstruction to buy the traffic signal outright. I mean, we're acquiring them every time we do a capital project, it seems like. And in the long term, it is cost savings, but usually when you can tie it in with a project and get a 50% match on that piece of it,
Yeah.
it really helps out because they're just going up in price every year.
You can go ahead, Debbie. I have a tangentially related question.
How many lights do we own now in the city?
Oh, let's see. I don't know that number for sure off the top of my head. I would say,
At what intersections, do you know?
so we own the one at Roland Drive and Shawnee Mission Parkway. We own Woodson, we own Broadmoor, we own Lamar and Johnson Drive. We own the
Do we want to go back and revisit the whole issue of buying, we talked about this, again, we looked at, and when we purchased our streetlights, we also talked about traffic signals, and we elected not to move forward with that, but we can certainly run the analysis again of what we're spending annually. We've talked about that as we looked at that Renewals Direct program, and the fact that that energy is, not included, and we're spending $370+ thousand a year on traffic signals. So we could certainly look, dust off that analysis, and is there a long-term benefit?
How long ago was that analysis?
I'm sorry?
How long ago was that?
I think we bought those signals in 13 or 14, it feels like.
Brent, if we did the upgrade to the video thing,
I don't think that's approved.
Somebody else.
Sully she had a question.
Yeah,
I thought she had a conversation going over there. Go
No,
ahead.
I had a question about just where we're at on the street inventory, but that can wait till people have more questions about stoplights, but since that was related to when we might be doing the full depth, I was wondering where we're at.
So as we talked about at the retreat, we have been working on getting all of our existing asset
Right.
data sort of compiled. And so I think, I was doing in another meeting, so I wasn't in the update meeting. And I think probably the primary focus today was stormwater. But, I think we're moving down that path, but we're still trying to get everything we have in order to be able to evaluate that.
So we don't really have a timeline at this point, okay.
No.
Man,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm not sure who was up first, so Pat, go ahead.
oh wow, did I forget my question? No, the video stuff that they're gonna put on, or that we're asking to put on, that's not gonna require anything torn out in the street, right?
Nope. It's all overhead, and the wires are run down the poles to the control box.
So then if 5 years down the road, we're redoing the whole street and buying the lights, then that $800-something would be a moot point anyway.
Yep.
Okay,
So we
so I can support that, yeah.
tear it down, and we buy a new one and
Yeah.
put it up, and then we go to the radar, the most up-to-date enforcement and new traffic cabinets. Because some of the traffic cabinets now, the reason why we're updating our traffic signals we own is that software is basically obsolete. So if they get mowed down by a semi or something, it's really tough to fix those cabinets and find that hardware now. So the more up-to-date you can have that stuff, if it does go down, it gives you the ability to get it fixed also in a timely fashion.
As a member of the council, could I get a remote control for that?
Make it happen.
Yes. Go ahead, get.
I would go ahead and support moving ahead on this, given the fact that
Got complaints coming in, I'm concerned about that,
So I would support moving this forward.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
One
Yes.
If we do an ongoing analysis or go back and look at the entire inventory of the stoplights we own, I would like to see if there is a maintenance agreement, or when we do have costs associated, what those costs are, that needs to factor into the whole.
So-
For the lights we own.
For the lights we own.
So are you asking for the amount of money we spend on maintenance for the lights we own every year?
Correct.
Correct?
Well, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm saying if we go back and start looking at the inventory of the lights we own and kind of doing some cost analysis, the pros and cons of owning versus not owning, I'd like to know, any money that's being spent on them, whether it's regular maintenance or someone's hit them and we have to fix them, what those costs are, that needs to be factored into the
And it will be.
comprehensive
We
balance.
did that same thing with the streetlights. What are the ongoing maintenance costs associated if we're going to take those over? Because right now they're built into our lease rates.
Right.
Hillary?
One more thought, I support moving this ahead, just a quick question. Do you feel like after we get this light added to the street light, or the video surveillance added to the street light, that patch that's there, that just, I know you know how bad it is, but do you feel like we'll be able to better maintain it
Yes.
and keep it in good condition so it's not so unsightly?
It is. So I was waiting to have this conversation to fix it, but also another thing that will come to that cost, if we did cut in new loops and fix the pavement, I know, we didn't spend $140, we fixed it and then it went bad again, then there's that initial cost to cut loops in again. So, yeah, if we gotta go in there and the road base is bad, we can dig it out a foot, pour concrete back in, and then 4
right, so we're gonna take it to council, do you want to consent or not?
Yes, consent.
All right, Brent, Broadmoor Reconstruction.
Alrighty.
Construction contract.
You want to start and then I'll finish?
That would be totally fine.
Okay. All right.
So-
Sesame Street thing.
In reference to the award, contract award for Broadmoor Reconstruction, Johnson Drive to Broadmoor, I'm sure everybody's aware of the project. We're discussing the approval of the contract award for Amino Brothers Incorporated, improvements to Broadmoor and Johnson Drive between Johnson Drive and Martley, in the amount not to exceed $1,081,404.69. Broadmoor is a cars eligible street. It is a minor collector, 40-foot wide, residential, commercial, and industrial traffic. The existing pavement, curb, sidewalks, stormwater, landscaping, traffic signal is all in poor condition. I mean, it's lived its life for sure. I'm sure you drove it, the street's falling apart, and it's getting even worse with the water and the gas and the improvements we've already been able to make up there, which was no cost to the city too, also. In October 17, 2018, the council adopted Resolution 1014, which established the new design concept for the project. Proposed improvements also included, full depth reconstruction of the street, which is usually about 10 inches of asphalt plus a fly ash base or a concrete base. ADA improvements, pavement marking improvements, bike sharrows, new traffic signal on Johnson Drive and Broadmoor. On March 12th, we solicited 3 bids, came back. All bids exceeded the engineer's estimate for this project, with the Amino Brothers being the lowest qualified bidder. Being the lowest, most reasonable bid, it's in the table below, you guys have seen it. The Amino Brothers bid came back $172,206 over the engineer's estimate, so the project is right now over budget, and we were trying to figure that out. I was able to secure through the county a change order for CARS funding for an additional $75,000 on the project. That is the max change order you can get through the county. So it's a 150 change order, so 75% on 75 on our side, 75 on their side is as far as you can take it on with the change order through the county funded system. Last time we talked to you, we approved the GBA task order for construction and inspection. That also exceeded the budget. This project's evolved since, I think, 2011, and in the last year we've made some design changes and upgrades. Also with the lead time on the traffic signals now, since there's only one outfit building them, that extended the inspection cost for how long they'd be on site and the 106-day working day completion for project. I guess questions?
Well, let me
Okay.
let me pass out some additional information, kind of go through the analysis of what, so since the bid tabs have come in, trying to go back and look at what has contributed to the changes, costs, where were our touch points. So then we can, let us provide some of that, and then we can answer some questions. And Paul Moore with Olsson is also here, who can kind of answer any questions that Brent and I may not be able to answer. So what I handed out, when we look at this, we go back and we look and say, the last time we formally adopted a project budget related to this Broadmoor project would have been last year as we went through the budget process. So we submitted a CARS request, and that CARS request at that time was based on an engineer's estimate that was developed in March of 2018 that showed construction of that project at $808,500. So when you look in our 5-year CIP plan, which is the loose CIP, so the loose CIP is what is existing. So that's what is included in the 2019 budget. So that's the one that the council adopted when we went through the budget process. So you see costs in 2018, those would have been design, right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation costs, and then the construction and construction inspection costs in 2019. So that $808,500 number included the design modifications that we made as we kind of went through the public participation process. So we had considered and factored in the issues that were raised by the property owners. So that's how we got to that $808,500. When we compare that to the engineer's estimate that went out with when the project was bid in March of this year, that engineer's estimate had gone from $808,500 to $909,195. Primary changes between March of last year and March of this year. Olsson increased the cost of the traffic signal by $75,000, and that was based on what they have been seeing in the market. I think Paul mentioned, and you can address this maybe more specifically, but you've got you're down to kind of one supplier.
For the poles and mast arms, yeah.
So the competition in terms of just pricing for traffic signals it has changed somewhat. So that was really you know, a big portion of the roughly $100,000 increase. I mean, there are a lot of other things in other line items, kind of what I would call more nickel and dime, as you know, quantities might have changed slightly or unit costs changed slightly. The traffic signal was the big driver. We also expanded the pavement replacement. So originally the project didn't contemplate replacing all of the pavement in the Johnson Drive and Broadmoor intersection. Feeling like I think the decision was made to, if we were going to touch there and address those AT&T manholes and take out the pork chop island, which is something that the City Council provided direction for, that it made sense to go ahead and replace that or extend the pavement out into that intersection. And then when Water One was out replacing their line in February of this year, they discovered some stormwater structures that we had not been aware of. And so there was a need to go back and reevaluate and incorporate some additional stormwater structures. That's about $31,000. So you can see between really the primary drivers of the difference between last March and this March was that increase in the traffic signal and that $31,000. We didn't have an opportunity to formally come back. So if those things had happened, and we'd been through another budget and CIP process, we would have incorporated all of those things and adjusted our budget accordingly to account for that. We do that each year with every project because we start with project estimates that may be 4 or 5 years old, particularly on the CARS projects, and we have to think about how we age and develop those over time. So that was kind of the first change that happened, where our budget just hadn't caught up with the realities of the project, if you will. Then when we looked at the engineer's estimate from March of 2019 compared to the low bid of Amino Brothers, you see a $172,000 difference. So Brent and I have been working for the last probably week and a half to go back and really look at that progression and try to boil this down and understand, is this being driven by design changes? Is it being driven by quantity differences? What's really impacting this change? And at the end of that analysis, we can account for the lion's share of that in about 4 major categories in the project. And so the first and the biggest one is the unit cost associated with the excavation and earthwork. I don't know, in going back, we also sat down and compared where there were similar line items on this project with the Foxridge project that we just constructed in 2017, and the bids that came in there, trying to look at how much swing, what sort of variation were we seeing. The excavation and earthwork on this project was far exceeded even what that was. So I think our estimates were maybe a little low on that side, but not completely unrealistic. So I'm not sure what's driving that. And Paul may be able, I think he's got some other ideas about what could be contributing to that. Sidewalk construction costs and concrete prices and curb and gutter kind of make up the rest of that. And again, those were differences in the engineer's estimate of unit cost and what each of the bids came in at in those
So Olsson revised the number in March,
Yes.
and it's now April. How do unit prices go up that much in that short period of time?
19%.
That's an excellent question. The items that she mentioned, the ones that were grossly over, I've never seen that in my career. I've never seen those unit costs that high, particularly curb and gutter, unclassified excavation. I don't know what they're up to. We had 3 bidders, we had 6 contractors pull plans, only 3 did. I'm wondering if they're not that hungry, I don't know, but some of these unit costs are exorbitant. And I can't explain why. And I don't think it went up that much in 1 month. But what I do is take bid tabs from previous projects, like Foxridge, I have a project I did in North Kansas City a couple years ago. Similar size project in a lot of ways. We use those bid tab, the average for that bid, for that particular unit cost, try to apply it to any differences that's in this project. For instance, if this project is more urban versus a greenfield and things like that. So I try to come up with a number that I feel fits this project based on past data, and that's all I have to go on. Now, if the contractors aren't that hungry, or we don't get too many bidders, sometimes stuff like this can happen. But
Have we called the contractor? I mean, it's something that's out of the ordinary, what you're telling me it is. Have we called the contractors and say, hey, these prices look out of the ordinary, what's going on? I mean, is there some rational, I guess this is your business, right? I mean, this is what you do for a living.
right.
And to have this jump this high, it just seems unreasonable. So there's something we're missing. And I guess, is that going to be all of our projects in the future? Are we under on all of them? If we are, we got a problem.
We aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, the Foxridge project, for example, I mean, and I think the thing to keep in mind, I mean, absolutely, we don't like to come whenever we have a project that's over budget. Sometime, when we brought the Foxridge project forward, we were under budget by almost $300,000. That feels really good, but it's about the same percentage miss in terms of estimating. So regardless of whether you estimate on the high side or the low side, well, I know, but you want to be able to maximize the, I understand, but you know, that $300,000 savings on Foxridge stays in, you know, our street program budget. And so, you know, I don't know, I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but we, you know, probably once every 5 years or so, we end up with a project for one reason or another that comes in over the budget. I think some of these categories, I mean, we can certainly make some of those calls between now and, you know, the 17th, but in looking at all 3 bids, so in some cases, you know, Amino Brothers wasn't the lowest in some of these specific line item categories. But on the excavation piece, they absolutely were, you know, they absolutely were. And I don't know whether that is, they're looking at that and it's a one block, pretty tight configuration in terms of the construction, as opposed to you have a little bit more room to spread out and maneuver, or, you know, you don't know if they're sort of hedging their bets a little bit or looking to, you know, make some money in that category.
That was what I was going to suggest or guess, the desirability of the project. When you say they're not that hungry, it's also one block, very tight quarters, many businesses looking over your shoulder the entire time. The delicacy of the digging as well, through all of the things that we already know are underneath the street. So I don't know if that just, if they round up, or I don't know.
The thing that bothers me is we're not really changing the grade that much there. It's mainly peeling off that old pavement. You know, unclassified excavation is not just dirt, so whenever they have to remove to get the grade where it is, but we're not changing the grade, so it's puzzling that they would go high on that type of job. But I
think Ken had a question first.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, that, you know, I think the overestimating, if we're gonna look in the future at the accuracy of the estimates, or dig deeper into that, I think the overestimating on the cost is also an issue, because it might deter us from pursuing projects that we really need to do. If,
Yeah,
it's coming
right
in
back to
$500,000 more.
Right.
So I think, obviously, it's more upsetting as an individual event when a project is over as opposed to under, but I think for getting things done for the city, both are detrimental.
Well, and I'll give you an example that's, that's on the agenda tonight. It's not probably clearly pointed out, but if you look at your 2 CIP worksheets that I've provided to you, look at your Foxridge 51st to Lamar project. So look at the loose sheet first. So in 2019, we had budgeted $730,000 for basically design, right-of-way acquisition, and utility relocation on that project. If you look at the sheet that's stapled to the Broadmoor project summary, you'll look to see that when we updated the engineer's estimates and our cost and budgetary estimates for that project, we're now closer. We brought that number down to $578,000 because we think we're that much closer to design. We're able to really start to dial in those costs. So those things happen every year as a part of the budget process. It's just when do we, the places where we have the potential to get caught are when something happens between our opportunities to formally adjust, that budget, so it makes that gap wider than it might be. And I do think that, trying to understand what the market is as well, when you have that additional sort of difference between that engineer's estimate and where your bids come in.
And the 2021 number for that same project has jumped a lot, while the 2020 number has come down, is that right?
Yes, so the construction actually
It's way up.
has gone up. And that engineering and design has come down.
Yes, I think if I may, the biggest, oh, go ahead, McKenna, still trying to do
It just seems that the range, you start out, the lowest is 19%, but the high is 56% over what was estimated. And so my question is whether it's an estimating problem or if it's a,
I don't know if that's any problem. I've never seen a excavation number in my 22 years. It was over 30 something a yard. Some of these guys were $50 and $80 a yard. That's not. Now, a contractor can play games with these things.
Can you go ahead and stand up?
And say who you
introduce
are?
yourself?
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm Paul Moore with Olsson. I'm project manager for this project and have been on various other projects in the city over the years. But I don't think it's an estimating problem. I've shown this estimate to my colleagues at Olsson. They fell out of their chairs too when they saw some of these things. We can certainly call them. I don't know. Contractors play games with bids for sure. They'll hide effort in certain bid items to try to get paid earlier in the project. For clearing and grubbing is an example of a unit cost that's pretty nebulous. It's a lump sum item, so they can front load that. Keeping in mind they still have to be a little bidder, but they can play these games. But what I have to go on is average bid prices over the last few years for that particular item. And that's what I hang my hat on. Ideally, I'm more in the middle of the pack when I give you an estimate. That's where I want to be. But if I had told you this job was $2 million and the high bidder is $1.5 million, you'd be thinking, well, come on, we could use that money somewhere else, or you would just scrap the project.
And I understand at various times in the history of the project, you had different estimates because there's inflation, unit prices change, but we're talking about a month. I guess that's where I'm having the problem. So we hire you to your expertise to guide us, and then you tell me you don't know the reason, and I guess that bothers me. That causes me a problem. So you say it's not an estimating problem, but yet we don't know what the problem is. So we don't know if we can expect this on future projects. I guess I'm looking for your expertise to tell us what happened here. Why did it happen? Is it going to happen in the future? Was it a one-time event? Is it just these contractors? Is there some fluctuate? Is there something happened with materials in the market? I'm looking for some kind of an explanation. You're telling me there is none. And that causes, I guess it causes me a problem looking at you as the expert for our city.
Well, I know of no reason why excavation costs should go up 100% in that time frame. The cost of fuel hasn't gone up exponentially.
Aren't you curious to find out what's happening? I mean, this is what you do for a living,
I'm
and they got blown out of the water, and I don't get a sense that you're even curious about what happened or going to explore it. It's like, well, it happened, and I believe it's happened on a previous project too with the city where there was quite a high estimate. Or you don't want the engineer's estimate to be the lowest, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So this has happened once before, has it not?
Not for me.
Pretty close.
For which project?
The Johnson Drive project.
I think we had one bidder that came in
Yeah, I was second.
under.
I was second lowest.
Yeah,
Again,
second
it was.
lowest.
What is your when you're bidding? So you said middle of the pack. So what is your strategy for bidding? Let's say your numbers come out to be 100. Are you a 101, 102? What is your strategy as a firm?
I'm looking at the averages for bid tabs for similar projects in the region. So if I look at unclassified excavation for similar job and it's coming in at $15 a yard, that's a pretty, and that's in the middle, that's a pretty safe place to be. I may increase that, I may decrease it depending on the particular project we're working on. If it's tight urban versus greenfield and stuff like that. That's what I have to go on. If that data is all I have to go on. Ideally, you have more than 3 bidders. I mean, I know that's out of my control, and maybe you could call that a cop-out, but normally you want more than 3 bidders, and we can't control that. We try to get the word out to all the contractors to bid, and like we said, 6 contractors did pull plans, but only 3 actually bid. So more competition, typically you get better bids as well. I've never seen prices that high. I mean, not even close. There's no logical reason for that I can see in market values of fuel or things like,
Well, there's no logical reason. I feel like we should accept it then. Somebody needs to call them. Who's going to call them?
we
Even
can
if
sure
they say
call them,
no, I mean, I feel vulnerable for the people I represent to say, go forward. We don't know why, but it's happening. Somebody needs to call. I don't know if it's our
And
people or
we
you.
can do it together.
I don't have a problem with that, and don't think I'm not curious, but I don't have any control over what they did.
But you need to know why they did it.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally won't vote on anything that doesn't have some backing. That's a logical scenario. They raise the price, what's the rationale?
Yeah.
That's part of the way most of us vote is,
Sure.
give me the data to show me why it's like it is. So,
Yeah.
personally, I think this should have happened before we met tonight. Somebody should have said, that's not in the normal scope of business. Why is it like that? And then we at least could have had some information to run off of.
How long was the bid out for?
A month. That's pretty typical for a job of this size. In fact, all the jobs in Mission have been that way.
Has there ever been a circumstance where we've gone back out to bid to potentially get more contractors for more options? Is that at all anything we've ever done more?
I don't think we've rebid a project in my time here. I mean, it's an option, it's questionable, and I think a lot of times when that happens, my experience in other places is the bids come in higher than they did the first time around.
I would concur with that.
That because somebody thinks, it's gonna be a little squirrely situation to,
Right.
They're not hungry this time, they're not gonna be hungry later in the summer when there's more work.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
just want to make sure. Yeah, I think we're in a situation now where we have to deal with the current bid, move on that. Well, we definitely would like to have you and Laura go back and look into this, and give us the whys.
Sure.
Obviously, if there's a way they could adjust their bid, that'd be lovely, but we're not asking. I don't think we should go back and ask them to do that. We just need to deal with it now and let you know that we are unhappy with the results, the way this turned out. We'd like to have it a little tighter, 3%, 5%, I think we would expect or could live with, but a 19% change in that, like I said, in that short of time, that's kind of.
Great, Ken.
Yeah, we're very unusual.
What did the county have to say when we went back and asked for additional cars, change order?
Oh, they were okay with it. It just has a 75 max on each side, so it was just at 150, so that's as much as you can apply for a change order. So that's what it's built in for, is stuff like this. This one just went over that percentage, so we were at that $75,000 max.
They use, I mean, they do this all the time on a
Okay.
variety of projects, so it just,
I mean, it took
it's
like.
not an uncommon process for, you know.
So, along with, gaining clarity on why we're so off, I am really interested to see if their responses match up, or if they're even completely different. It would concern me that they're just making up reasons for the increase, so it's just something that.
And that sounds like we'll get clarity on that when they make the phone call. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I had two things. One on the cars variance window. I mean, it sounds like to me that's a pretty good gauge for, how much at most estimates should be off by, if that's the amount that the county is willing to compensate for. That's maybe, where things should be at. Anything above that, we should be asking, more serious questions. And then, I also have concerns about the project as a whole at this point. I mean, I know I've gone on the record before that I didn't like this design, I didn't like the second design or the way that the process was handled. And I think if you're gonna do a project that one was out of code to begin with, and now you're asking us to come back with $240,000 more, I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to give it more thought. I don't know if that's something I can support.
Any idea why the cost of removing existing structure seems to have skyrocketed? Like, that's the one line item that's way out of whack, and I don't really.
It's a lump sum item, so those are really hard to put your finger on. Like if you're removing a bridge on a job, for example, it's a lot easier to put a price tag on. In this case, we're talking about removing the existing storm structures and underground and some pipe and foundation for the old signal and stuff like that. They play games with those lump sum items, depending on how they want to weight their bid. Another example would be like if there's a bid item where they see a potential for a lot of issues on their end, they might load that up and reduce another bid item to try to get compensated. Like if they think that there's going to be more excavation than was in the plans, which there's not in this case. It's real straightforward. It's just an example. They could try to load up that price on that, knowing that there would be a change order coming. But that's what I'm talking about, the games that they'll play with, where they put their money. They've got a bottom line number they're wanting to hit, and they move around the money throughout the unit cost. Generally, it's not as wacky as this, frankly, but lump sum items like that are hard to put your finger on when it's random storm stuff. But I would agree it's high.
I mean, the lowest bidder was more than double the estimate, and the highest bidder 8 times the estimate, so. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the high bidder was just, I don't know what he was doing.
Not wanting to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's in here that I would point out is the first, on the bid tab, the first line item is force account, which is $30,000, which is essentially reserved for potential change orders. So that is something that is controlled, and there's a potential for savings in that particular line item as we go through the budget. But so that's really, at this point, in this estimate, in this bid tab, that's the only place where there's probably any give in terms of, as the project moves forward. That would be sort of the contingency change order account on the project.
Paul, I know we're not your only account, so have you seen on any other jobs this in the last month or 2 months that this same kind of thing has happened?
With the traffic signals, yes, we have, and what we mentioned, we upped that at the last minute to compensate for that. Traffic signal stuff is something we've heard through other project bids and just in the industry that's going way up.
We actually upped that a year ago. That traffic signal, that increase, the $75,000 increase in the traffic signal happened last March. And then, I mean, as it turns out, when you look at the low bid on that, it was still we bumped it to $250, and it's at $263. So that was that was a good adjustment at the time. We just didn't catch, we didn't catch our budget up
Yeah.
at that point, but that one played out in terms of,
Yeah.
making good on that estimate, I guess.
Perfect example of that is Johnson Drive in Woodson, which we did the year before, two years ago, almost the same size signal, and the low bid on that was $200,000. So that's how much that's gone up in just 2 years. And it's primarily the signal poles and the mast arms that you hang the lights on. And I've had examples in Overland Park where it went the other way, where this was a $6.5 million job. That's my estimate. All the bids were in that realm, except the winner, who was at 4.5. And we came to find out after that bid that firm had just missed a big bid that they wanted really bad and needed a job really bad, and came in just, wow, you guys really were hungry. And so it can go that way too. And then we saw really big dips in bid costs back during the recession. Obviously, contractors were really hungry.
But nothing else here real recently.
I have not seen anything like this, and neither of the people at my firm that I've concurred with here for this.
Well, I
Any
think,
other questions?
Let me walk you through just a little bit about kind of what the potential impact is. I know we still have, some calls to make and some questions to ask, but let me kind of walk you through in the bigger picture scheme of kind of what that looks like from a budgetary standpoint, so you have that sense. So the CIP sheet attached, stapled to that summary. What I've done is I've tried to go in and update with year-end. So beginning balance in 2019 is reflective now of the numbers that you'll see in the next month coming out of the audit, updated for revenues, an increase in the CARS reimbursement from the $450 that was in the previous plan to the $528. A carryover, so you see the Broadmoor number at 1338. That's because we haven't spent the dollars on right-of-way acquisition that were budgeted in 18, so those rolled over and they need to be, shown as an expense. Again, they rolled into fund balance. We've just pulled them out of fund balance and show them there on the Broadmoor project. You've got the UBAS treatment, the task order for that we just discussed a few minutes ago. Public Works maintenance programs, bridge maintenance, debt service. The other thing you'll see is a debt service reserve of about $1 million. And that's just, as we've talked about, needing to begin to set aside as we think we get closer to some resolution on TUF, just wanting to preserve some flexibility there. So you can kind of see that bottom line impact. And if you kind of look at these side by side, you'll see right now we'd be $85,000. We'd have a deficit in the street program in 2020, but that doesn't account for any increases in revenues or any other changes in project costs that we might anticipate, and that also includes still a $300,000 placeholder for full depth reconstruction projects. So if you look at the overall impact that I think this has to the street program plan, the numbers increase, but the drivers for the deficits in the out years are still your two big projects, your Foxridge Phase 2 and the next phase of the Johnson Drive rehab from Lamar West to Metcalf.
Question for Laura?
So it doesn't dramatically change anything else that we've already prioritized or the decisions that we have to make really over the next 5 years of this plan. It certainly is, again, not the favorite position to be in when we look at a project overrun versus a project cost savings.
So staff's position is to go ahead and go forward with the...
I don't think going and rebidding the project is a reasonable alternative. I don't think the results will be any better. I think that if we can look at, I don't know where the conversations, I think we do need to have the conversations with the contractor and, I think now, at least for me, the questions are very specific. I really understand the what and the areas where we need to focus, instead of just, you know, why do we have this, you know, more generic project overage. I think we can really narrow in on those line items that we've been talking about, whether that's the excavation or the concrete prices or curb and gutter work. And I think that helps the, you know, helps the conversation and focuses that conversation. You know, the utility work is done. I don't think there are redesign alternatives that don't potentially, I mean, I think if you say, can we go back and redesign, or do we want to redesign to a different standard? You know, that's certainly an option, but I think then you're going to look at increasing costs as well, because you're going to go back and redesign, you're going to go rebid.
Would that all have to go through cars again? I mean, if we did do a redesign?
And the time, the loss of time.
Right, I mean, it would just
Well,
stall
and I
out.
think, you know, the
Project
question
would
is,
stall as
do
it
you,
is.
you know, and I know some have not agreed with the final design that was approved. The question is, you know, that seemed to be the design that got the most support from the property owners that are on the street currently. If we go back through that process and redesign, and the cost came down. I mean, that $808,000 number that we started with last March had come down from, I think, 1.1, I don't know.
I think 1.6.
I mean, it was 1.3, 1.6, some number. So that number had already come down. We know we're going to go in the other direction on this project if we go back to, you know, the on-street parking and some of the other things that were part of that 2011 conceptual design.
I think we're getting too complicated. Honestly, I want a person-to-person call. If we have an engineer, that would be great, because an engineer can talk to an engineer and just ask. We have a 19% increase. We are voting on behalf of people in a small city. What is the rationale? That piece by piece. And then if you bring that, I mean, that's something for us to look. I don't think anybody's asking to go out for research.
Sure.
I just want to know why.
Yeah, we can absolutely see if we can't get some more clarity around that. I can't promise you the quality of the answer that we'll be able to bring back, but we can certainly ask that question.
I mean, I'm not telling you we're all accepting of the reason, but, you know, at least there will be something for the record.
Right.
Why we went ahead and just said yay for 19% and didn't know why. That makes us look bad, I think.
That's the current bid, that's why.
Well, that's not a good one.
Go ahead.
And I mentioned this to Laura too, but you know, you mentioned the right-of-way timeline and that we haven't had those discussions yet. I think it would be prudent to let those property owners who are getting the plan that they wanted know that we're now looking at this sort of overrun, and for them to have that information when they're making their asks for those easements from the city.
Okay, could certainly do that.
So do we want to go forward with it to cancel then?
I think so.
Contingent upon finding out why.
Okay.
So non-consent.
Obviously.
It's either going forward or not going forward.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no.
Going
If
forward,
you have a problem at council, then you can voice
Yeah.
it.
All right, thank you, everybody. The next action item is the Foxridge concrete repair, Brent Morton.
All right, 1 second.
So recuperate from that last one.
Glad you're in good spirits. So, this is a request for staff recommendation for Foxridge Drive concrete repairs. This project is in the CIP and a CARS funded project in 2021. It's been pushed out the last couple of years, funding wise. It's a 32-foot wide road, minor collector. The pavement on the south side of the Fox Hills apartment complex is basically totally gone. We have a huge water issue down there. Underground springs, they've replaced the fire line to the apartments up there. We thought that was an issue at some point. That wasn't a problem. There's no under drain or anything behind that rock shelf that comes down that hill, so it's just constantly water. I mean, you can go down there and it runs all summer long. That doesn't give us the ability to go down there and hot patch it. I mean, you can go mill it 6 inches, put it back, and in 3 months, it's all coming out, and you got water just coming up through the pavement. All that's going to be addressed in 2020 in the design of Foxridge. There's going to be under drains and new storm system all behind that side of the road and behind the sidewalk that will bring all that water underground and into the storm system and get it out to the creek channel. But until that point, if you drove that road, it is by far one of the worst roads in town at that section. So what we're asking is for some concrete repairs there with some, it's the high early mix, which allows cars to drive on it almost 6 hours after you pour it. And it also, high early's got the chemical in it that heats it up fast so you can pour it in wet conditions and it will still cure out because it starts reacting right away. So you can dig it out 8 inches and you can come back and pour it right away even with water in the hole, and the stuff will set up. And you know, it's not a permanent fix, but it will give us a 2 or 3 year fix where we're not down there, you know, every other week cold patching or trying to hot patch and just, you know, wasting staff time, city's funds with cold patch or hot asphalt. We've done some concrete patching, staff has, in the last 3 years down there. And we're, with our staff, you know, we can maybe pour 10 yards with the guys we got, you know, and, you know, we don't have a huge staff, so this is a little bit bigger scope of a project. And you got to get it in fast with the high early mix. You got about 45 minutes to work the concrete itself before it gets hard, and you're just, that's what you got. So, you know, you bring a contractor in, you know, a few more guys that, you know, can get it done quick and, you know, get it struck off and looking good where it sets up and we get traffic back on it. So it is a temporary fix, but I think it's necessary to get us by. We had a rough winter this year too, and it got even worse. We had major ice issues down there all winter. We're scraping ice every week when it's cold out, so that is even worse on the pavement, using the loaders and the skid steers down there. But you know, the ice will get up to 6 inches thick. And salt, I mean, it will work up to a point, but you might wait a couple days, so it does become a danger issue. If you got the concrete, you can go down there and beat on it a little harder and try to get that ice off the road, and it's a little more accessible for the staff to scrape that ice. It's a pretty simple project. It's about 461 feet, about 300 square feet of 6-inch concrete. The road's about 10 inches thick, so they will add rock where they need to, but there should be an asphalt base under there where you can just pour on top of it, and it will get us by for the next 2 or 3 years down there. So,
Questions?
yes.
Do we still anticipate doing that full repair in 2021?
We do.
Okay.
And, I mean, I think it almost has to happen in 21 as bad as that road has got. I mean, it's in, I would say the top 2 in poor condition in Mission right now, for sure. Just with drainage issues, curbs falling apart. I mean, it's a maintenance nightmare. You know the turn down there, I mean, you almost got to shut the whole street down just to go down there and patch on it. I mean, you can't send the guys out there and shut half the lane down. You got to kill traffic, detour everybody around to go down there and work on it. So if we can, you know,
Sounds like a good temporary fix.
it will be.
Yeah, what made you go with AR Construction?
They were the lowest bidder. Sorry to go over the prices.
Oh, no.
They were the lowest bidder. They've also done quite a bit of work for me in town so far. They actually did the City Hall steps out here, and they're doing the community center steps right now. They're not a huge contractor, but for some of these smaller projects, they got about a 6-man crew, and they usually come in a pretty low number compared to some of these other contractors, and they do good work for sure. So.
Debbie?
I know Kansas Asphalt put a detailed description, like how they're insured and things like that. I see nothing on AR. Is there any detail?
I mean, we've got all that stuff on file now since they've done
Because we
work.
just had them work on it.
Yeah, I mean, they've done some work for the last 2 years. We keep that documents for 2 years, bonds and insurance down at Public Works, so I don't require them to turn that in if we've already got that stuff on file.
Okay, just so we know. Okay.
And like when Kansas Asphalt's bidding on it, they want me to have those documents now too, so when they bid on something else, I've got that stuff and they can just turn in a bid.
Perfect, thank you.
And the road will be closed for how long, if at all?
Temporarily closed for 2 days probably. So there will be a tear out period, which at least one lane of traffic will be open. When we go back to pour it, some of those patches are coming all the way out into the whole lane. So there will be a shutdown probably for a complete day to get it in, let it sit up for 6 hours, and then let traffic drive back on it. So there'll be some detour signs and some road closures, but with the high early mix, you drastically can put traffic on it. I mean, 6 hours compared to 4 days. So.
Very perfect. Any other questions for Brent?
Take it.
Consent?
Consent.
I'm good with consent.
All right, great, thank you, Brent.
Thank
Next
you.
item up is Stormwater, BMP, Interlocal Agreement, Renewal, Brent Scott.
There we go. This is an annual program that we participate in with Johnson County, Stormwater Best Management Practices. It's a cost share program. The county provides 50% of the cost to those that participate. There's no cost to the city. We're just acting as kind of a middleman. We advertise to our residents. If they're interested, they go to City Hall or call us, fill out an application, do the project, and then they bring the receipts back to us. We submit all that to the county, and the county reimburses for the grant costs. So, typically the programs include rain barrels, rain gardens, bioswales, native tree plantings. Last year we did one project, it was a native tree planting. In 2017 we had 3 projects, 2 residents installed rain barrels and 1 did a rain garden.
Any questions?
Do we return funds if we don't expend all of them?
There's no funds to return because
Oh, because
there's
it's just
something out
as
pocket
they
for the
come
city.
in?
Right.
Okay. More just-
Yeah.
County reimbursement.
Just a middleman handling paperwork.
Thank you.
What do we do to advertise? What are we doing to advertise? Like, we only got 1 person last year. What are we doing to promote the
We put that on
program?
our webpage, we'll put an article in our newsletter.
It's been the Mission Magazine, I'm assuming. Ken, did you have a question?
No. I'm ready to move forward.
All right, consent
Consent.
or none? All right, thank you, Brian. Okay, the next item up is the ordinance revising membership for PRT.
Yes.
Laura.
There's talk before the PRT, the Parks Commission and Tree Board were combined back in 2017. And at the time we looked at that merger, we didn't want to remove anybody who was currently serving from that position. So we created a board that had a membership that was significantly larger than most of our other advisory boards and commissions. Since that time, we have struggled to have a quorum at most of our meetings in order to be able to conduct regular business. And so we've been talking about and looking at bringing a recommendation forward to reduce the membership, to bring it more in line with the Planning Commission, the Sustainability Commission, and the CIP Committee. We can do that at this point as a result of position vacancies, so it would not require us to remove anybody who is currently serving on that board. The PRT discussed this at their March 18th meeting, and we're in full support of staff's recommendation to reduce the membership from 15 to 11 members. That membership is established via ordinance, so it does take consideration of a new ordinance by the City Council if you were interested in making that change.
Any questions for Laura?
Support that.
Consent?
Consent.
All right, we have 2 discussion items this evening. The first one up is the CARS program update. Brent Morton.
Thank you. For the discussion item tonight, this is the 2020-2024 CARS program. This program is using a combination of state gas tax dollars and the county general fund. The CARS program funds cities' construction and construction maintenance eligibility streets each year. The cities have to submit a 5-year improvement plan to the county every year with an updated plan. The county goes through this process, takes a look at all the projects, scores them, and lets you know which projects they're going to fund for the upcoming year. When you turn in your projects for the upcoming year, you also have to have an engineer's estimate, preliminary map of where the project's taking place, and then your CARS form filled out. The streets we have eligible in Mission is Lamar, Foxridge to 67th Street, 51st Street, Lamar East to city limits, Foxridge, 56th Street to Lamar, Johnson Drive, Metcalf to Rowe, Johnson Drive, between Johnson Drive and 63rd Street, Knoll, Johnson Drive to 67th Street, Martway, Metcalf to Roland Drive from Johnson Drive to Shawnee Mission Parkway, and Broadmoor, Johnson Drive to Martway. Similar to the city's CIP, it's a forecasting tool for budgeting. Projects can change in the CARS funding period. I mean, sometimes it's millions of dollars. So you're really, when you're starting to forecast out 5 years, like we were talking about earlier, you don't know what the engineering costs are going to be, or if the road's going to be in worse shape, so you can start making those changes as that project gets closer to when you're getting close to designing and actual construction. So it's a forecast tool for sure. You want to get the numbers as close as you can, but they do change from year to year for sure. For 2020 on our CARS list is Lamar from Foxridge to Shawnee Mission Parkway. This was going to get, as we talked about earlier, constructed this year. Got pushed to 2020 for CARS funding with a 50% match, which gives us the ability to use the funds we were going to use this year and almost maybe 30 to 40% more curb replacement and sidewalk updates. So it really stretches the project and doesn't put us as tight restrictions on the money we had for this year. We're able to take it all the way to Shawnee Mission Parkway without any issues. The bike lanes, even if the funding didn't come through, we had the ability to install those ourselves. So it really bridges the gap and makes us the ability to do that project right for 2020. So I think it's a good move on city and staff for making that decision. I think we'll get a lot better product out of it, and a longer life out of the street for sure, and give us some time to update and fix some full depth patching this year. For 2021 is Foxridge Phase 2 from 51st Street to Lamar, basically. The project is, 50% funded. Just as we talked before, the street is in disrepair, so I think for 2021 it's a good move to get that project designed next year and move forward with it in 2021. We'll have those costs more dialed in. They went up a little bit this year on the Foxridge piece for the construction costs, but as we get into the engineering and finding out the under drains and the landscape walls, and down there where we're doing those concrete repairs now, it's a giant rock shelf, so that always comes into play when you're designing those roads. If we're gonna narrow that street in like the last phase of Foxridge and add sidewalk all the way down through for walkability improvements, ADA improvements. So as narrowing that street, we're getting away from that rock shelf, so hopefully there's some cost savings there too. So that's for 2021.
Brent, could you just quickly tell us the major and the minor distinctions are based on what? Traffic flow, size of road, what's the major and the minor?
For the CARS program, it is based on traffic flow.
Traffic flow?
Traffic
Yes.
volumes, yeah.
And I don't have those numbers offhand, but if you do go to the county's CARS website, there's a form right there that tells you what the traffic count's got to be for making CARS eligible. I just don't want to, I looked at it the other day, I just don't want to tell you something that's not totally correct, so. And then for like a minor CARS route like Broadmoor, sometimes you have to do a traffic study, but it's connecting two CARS routes, so that makes it like a secondary, but it's, Johnson Drive and Martway, so it's got to be in those two categories. 2022 is Johnson Drive, Lamar Row. This is a UBAS project, which is, as of this year or next year, eligible for CARS funding, which is something new, which also gave us the ability to fill in our next 5 years with CARS funding. Before that wasn't a possibility, so it was more full depth reconstruction, mill and overlay, and those projects come with big ticket prices, so we weren't able to fill in those gaps every year because you get into the mill and overlay and the ADA improvements, you get, the sticker price gets high and you can't have a project that size every year. So with the ability for UBAS, it helps us extend the life of our CARS routes and hold on to what we fixed in the last 10 years and keep it up to date. So Row, Knoll, Johnson Drive,
And you'll see, I'm gonna interject here, because you'll see in the current street program plan that's in our budget, you see that UBAS treatment only goes null to road. This one, it now goes Lamar to row. So the cost was $135,000 and now it's $322. But we extended that treatment to look at picking up it, because we will be in that time frame, having done the major Johnson Drive project in 2014 to really pick up that entire section.
There won't be any disturbance of the stormwater conveyance.
No. No.
No, UBAS is basically a surface treatment. I mean, it's a spray asphalt, it's super sticky and kind of porous, but it really extends the life of the pavement. If you can get it down soon enough before the pavement deteriorates.
Right.
So like Foxridge or something like that, I mean, it's past that point where you're just throwing your money out the door. So it just helps you maintain the roads that we've spent on all these capital projects to get them up to where they're at now, making sure they stay that way for 30 years or 40 years, you know, keeping them nice.
And better than a chip seal treatment on.
We can chip seal it.
Everyone's favorite.
Cut that number in half.
I just have a question in regards to, it looks like this Foxridge Phase 2.
Yes.
It looks like it's a $5 million project in some place, and then I've got, I'm looking at the street program, CIP, it's at $4,430,000.
So that's got design, right-of-way easement costs, construction costs, so it's spread out from 2020 to 2021.
Okay.
So a chunk of that is next year, getting the design, and I think we're gonna lose some of that right-of-way cost. I mean, don't quote me on that, but since we're narrowing everything down and adding sidewalk, and we're staying within basically what we own now, I don't think we're gonna have to get too far out of the right-of-way. So I don't know if we're gonna use a lot of that funds, that part, so.
Okay, cool, thank you. I'm sorry, you still in the middle?
2023.
2023.
23 and 24.
We got it. Yeah, so this is Johnson Drive, Metcalf to Lamar, by far the biggest project we got coming in the next 5 years. This is also a CARS funded project. It is basically like the last phase of Johnson Drive. I don't think the on-street parking and stuff is going to be as big a play with the way it's configured now, but it is full depth reconstruction, stormwater, interceptors, continuing on to Metcalf, ADA improvements. The traffic signal piece is probably going to get taken out since we are upgrading that this year on Broadmoor and Johnson Drive. But the sidewalks will probably end up getting widened out. New signage, street lighting, probably the decorative street lighting to tie in with Johnson Drive through that thoroughfare. The estimated cost on this is $10,772,259. This project is will be funded by CARS, but there will also be some other funding mechanisms that come into play when that project gets closer. So I know it seems like a big number now, but there's other funding opportunities also there. So.
We're pursuing SMAC funding and
STPs.
STP funding on that both. So similar as we did on the first phase of Johnson Drive.
Can I ask you a question about that? Please. That interceptor that they're talking about putting in up there, will that remove the final pieces to the floodplain?
No, I don't believe that. No, we will still have some sections until we address some of this creek from Lamar to basically Maple. I don't think we take all of those pieces out of the floodplain. So it helps. It will help reduce because it's not.
Yeah, it's not going to divert it down south. Isn't that where it's going now?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not going to flow off of and into as much into the creek here. More of it will. I mean, it will be picked up there, so it will reduce the flow. But I don't think that. It's been a long time since I looked at the actual hydraulics of that, but I don't think.
I was thinking that it did.
Well, I'll double check that again, but I don't think it takes anything else out of the
Mike had
floodplain.
presented as,
I don't think it does.
No?
No.
Your Johnson Drive is a little bit higher for floodplain, so it's going to catch everything from the north coming down, diverted through the interceptor to Johnson Drive, but you still have south of Johnson Drive. So you'll still have some going back into the creek.
Right.
Not as much.
Not as much.
But I don't. We'll double check that, but I don't think it takes the rest of that out.
Engineer's
of the
gone, I was
floodplain.
asking him, right.
Don't ask
I'll
him
play an
about
engineer
stormwater.
now.
I was just kind of thinking down the road.
No, it's a good
Does
question.
that help?
But I do think it's the.
It does help, I mean.
I think
yeah.
it helps, but it's
Yeah.
this, it's specifically the improvements to the, what's left in this kind of open channel behind, you know, Johnson Drive, that will get the rest of those properties out of the floodplain.
So this is
Carry on.
no action,
You're
right?
good. It's just
No.
discussion.
So what will happen is we will refine, so we have to submit preliminary, oh, sorry, we have one more project.
But this is just a discussion item, and I forgot to bring it up, but we will have to bring this back to council for approval of a resolution to get to cars for our 5-year program. So that will be coming, it's got to be due by July, so you'll probably see that in the next couple of months.
Sheldon, he went out to take a call, and now I think he's in trouble.
Who?
Sheldon's in the vestibule.
Using his phone.
Oh, it doesn't lock, that door doesn't
Okay.
lock. Yeah, not that inside door, so if he's in the vestibule, he's fine.
Rolling forward.
No.
Oh,
the
yeah.
HOA.
Yeah.
No.
Kristen and I got started.
We did.
Sorry, you want to do the last one?
Okay, so 2024 is Row Avenue, and we are milling and overlaying our piece from Johnson Drive, that intersection, to 59th Street in conjunction with Fairway. They are also doing theirs that year in a CARS project to 63rd. So we're going to try to tie that all together and do that whole road at one time. We are contributing a little bit on Fairway's piece too also that year because we own half that road. But we decided to put in the CARS program since they were only taken to 59th Street and we had an open year right now that we could just mill and overlay and make that whole street look good again. So that will be in 2024. And some of those projects will address ADA ramps, not improvements, but maintenance. So some of those ramps after 10 or 12 years start cracking and blowing apart. So those are built into the project as well, and some spot curb repair, and just bringing the streets back up to where they need to be. Any questions?
Darn good
Sean.
report, Brent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brent.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Brent. The next discussion item, we have 51st Street traffic safety concerns. Laura Smith.
So last month, we had a resident that attended our committee meeting and talked about the potential for actually raising the speed limit on 51st Street east of Lamar, and you know, generally some traffic concerns. I know through the course of that discussion, we had some concerns from the council's perspective, just overall safety. So talked with Dave Meninga of GBA as traffic engineer. They are in the process of looking at some site distances. I mean, he was familiar with that stretch of road. He's been out and driven it a couple of times since. Absolutely would not recommend an increase in the speed limit on that section of roadway. So that is not a recommendation that will be coming back to the council. As you look at, you know, at some point, someday, if we're doing reconstruction and we really want to tackle, you know, trying to improve the grades or bring the grades down on some of those hills, that's certainly something that we could consider. You're going to be into a multi-million-dollar project, particularly if you look at the houses on the north side and the driveways and the stormwater concerns that would be created by bringing some of those other sections down. So certainly not an ideal design, but a lot of issues. One of the things that they are doing, so he thinks that there are some things that we can do from a signage perspective, but he is out looking at some of the site distances from the various intersections that the cross streets that come into 51st Street to make sure that we can bring back the appropriate placement for those signs. And so I think the signage and probably increased enforcement are our best tools at this point in terms of trying to improve the safety of that roadway. So we can either, I mean, it's really up to you. I can bring back, once he has those recommendations, I can bring it back to committee, or we can just get the signs installed and, you know, move forward. Obviously, that's not going to be a tremendous expense. And then I can give you an update. So if you're comfortable with us just kind of following their recommendations, we can certainly do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, we've got one guy, and I'll talk to Ruth.
Okay.
Okay, and then the final item we have is department updates.
Just a couple of quick things, and then we can move into our next meeting. Brent tells me that the 52nd Street Mill and Overlay is scheduled to happen in the next couple of weeks, so that's a good thing. We'll be anxious. That's the one we didn't get in before the weather turned on us this last
We've
fall.
got a couple of disabled people in the neighborhood, so I just need to have a heads up.
Okay.
They got door knockers coming out 3 days ahead of time, and I've been in constant contact with them. So they're finishing up some projects right now, so as soon as I have a for sure date, I will pass that along to you.
All right, thank you so much, Brent, appreciate it.
Also, we are getting, as I'm sure you all are, because you're passing them on to us as well, lots of, now everybody's out and about and thinking about pothole repairs and street repairs and all of those kinds of things. So we are working on that. We're maintaining a list. One of the things that I would suggest, or as you talk with residents, several of the calls that have come into us have been reported as curb that's gone basically, or damaged curb. When we go out and look at that, it turns out that it's actually the asphalt that has chunked out alongside the gutter, which we consider more of a pothole. That's a patching issue. So we'll certainly go out. I mean, continue to feed us that information. But what you might suggest, and we know we do have bad curb, but we've had bad curb in places around town. So we'll look at trying to potentially bring back to you if we feel like we need to do a more extensive curb replacement program as a result. Some places it doesn't make sense for us where the curb is bad to go repair that, because the trash trucks and the other vehicles are just going to push the street up and will ruin what we spend the money on. So we'll try, as we find those areas, if we don't think we're going to be able to address it, we'll make sure that we let you know, and you can pass that on, or we'll pass that on to our residents. But it's going to be a long summer of patching here and everywhere. The last thing, just quickly, I think I mentioned, but we did have word on Monday that the Gateway developer closed on the financing that he had been pursuing. He has indicated that they expect their contractors to remobilize on the site within the next week and a half to 2 weeks. And they've got plans that we anticipate will be coming through the door, and then we'll figure out how that moves through the Planning Commission and Council review process for that. So I talked with the Kansas City Business Journal yesterday afternoon, and I know Tom indicated to the mayor and I today that he'd had some calls from the media, so I don't know. He didn't say specifically who, so there may be some things on the news related to that, but I think everybody's pretty much up to speed on that, and that's all I have.
All right, that concludes the CDC.
Is there any way that update could go out on our social media too?
Yes, we will. I wanted
Stem the
to.
flow of questions.
I wanted to
first. I'm not telling you.
That's right.
social
That's what I said.
media.
I've told several people. Yes, we're going to tell you
Fabulous.
tonight, and we'll post it tomorrow.
Fabulous.
All right, now that concludes the CDC.
Brent, thanks again for
Quick
that.
break, or we get to?
So in that hole, at Broadmoor and Johnson Drive,
All right,
that has
let's go
been
ahead.
such a wonderful thing.
Keep rolling this.
Oh, the manhole. Those manholes.
That is, I kind of go over back and forth, it's just
Well,
how it does.
It's
It's wonderful.
We're good, Emily? All right. So we'll go ahead and call our Finance Administration Committee meeting to order at 7:57. A few minutes behind, we'll get through it pretty quick. We have a number of action items tonight. The first one up is the acceptance of the March minutes. Does anybody have any recommendations on corrections or additions or anything? No? Good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move forward and publish those as written. Next item up is the ordinance establishing the Rolling Court Townsend Community Improvement District, CID.
Yes. So I think, I'm not going to go into a lot of background or history, we all are pretty familiar with this, but at our March meeting we held a public hearing on the establishment of the CID with the revised petition that had been submitted that increased the annual assessment to $911 per year per unit. The next step in the process in creating the Community Improvement District is for the council to consider an ordinance that formally establishes that, which is what's included in your packet this evening. And then we would look, we are still, until we get through roughly the latter part of May, we are still within a protest period. that's contemplated through the statute before we would ever be able to consider to, advance any sort of financing conversation, an issuance of bonds for that. But I am working currently with Bruce Kimmel to bring back next month for you the plan of how we now turn this into reality potentially, or look for some options for that. I know Sheldon is here and Barb is here, so if you have any other questions, certainly answer those.
Just like to have it moving forward.
Moving forward, I think we all feel the same.
I'd say move this to the council,
Probably
non-consent.
not.
Regular, okay?
All right, next up, we have an update on the space needs analysis contract award. Chief Hadley, go ahead. Fill us in.
I know I got at least one resident that's making sure I'm on. Tom, I appreciate you coming. So the last space needs analysis that the city did was 10 years ago through PG Consultants, and during the recession, those kind of issues that we ran across, the city decided that we were going to do another one. Proposals went out through the ledger, and we got several of the different contractors that had worked over in Shawnee and sent it out to them. We had 6 different companies that submitted through us. They had to come and take a tour on 1 or 2 days for City Hall and the police station. Council members Pat Quinn and Hillary Thomas did those interviews with Brian Scott and I, and we essentially looked at the top 3 when Brian, Laura, and I met. The number 1 company was SFS Architecture. They've done some previous work in this city before. The original bid that we got was $60,000 to $70,000. They were the only company that did not break down their bid as the other ones did. And when I say break that down, most of the companies would break it down to, we'll come in and do the space needs analysis, and it'll cost you X amount of dollars, and then we'll look at this building for X amount of dollars. I asked SFS to send me another email to break that down like everybody else did, so that we can compare apples to apples. SFS has done work with the city in the past. Our group also thought that they would be the best ones to work with our community, and they also came in as the lowest bid. What we're asking for tonight is the approval for $15,760 for them to do the space needs analysis only. And then phase 2 would be, if they tell us that this building, it's possible to renovate and give us the space that we need, then we would move on with phase 2, which is them actually looking at this building and renovating it as an option. The 3 of us agreed that there was no point in spending the over $18,000 if we find out on the space needs analysis that this building isn't going to work. So that's why in the action item it's listed as phase 1 and phase 2. If phase 2 is possible, then we can come back to you and take a look at that. Their timeline would be is to start the end of April, and they would be done by May 31st. Happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
I just have a quick comment that we were all very impressed with this group, and they really stood out, and feel really good about them. High scores, I think all of us.
Well, thanks you guys for volunteering for that committee.
It's a full day.
Thanks for telling us.
I volunteer for that.
That's important.
Voluntold.
Voluntold, that's right. Well, and their community engagement, and they have an understanding. They did the community engagement piece with us when we looked at renovation of the outdoor pool and the sensitivity with the neighborhood. And I think we still hear from the neighbors about, how well they thought that process went. So I think SFS gets sort of our model and expectations in that regard.
We did have budgeted $30,000 last year for this project, so the fact that we came in at 15 and some change is pretty good.
The BG consultant space study was done in 2010.
2010, yes. There's a typo in the action item, so we'll get that updated. And it was actually done, at the time, the traffic coming to our municipal court every week was exceeding the fire code capacity, and that was the primary driver of the study. And as we've seen over the last 9 to 10 years, that has changed, and we've changed a lot of things in that process. And so that is certainly not the primary driver. It's now this other issue of, what do we need going forward? And we haven't really made any significant improvements to this building since the late 90s. And the efficiency of our operations and our ability to even just accommodate things like locker rooms in the police department is somewhat challenged.
And that was sorry, Pat, go ahead. I was just gonna say that was a common theme. Oh. I was just gonna say that was a common theme. It's just how, and Pat, you would probably agree that every single firm that we talked to just said, wow, this is a small space for a lot of what's going on.
It's definitely a need to redo this stuff. It would be nice if we could reuse the buildings and maybe just do a small add-on somewhere, but I don't think that's gonna turn out to be the case. I mean, when these guys came through and did their walkthrough, and every one of them goes down and looks through the police department, and their comment is, oh my God, that's a bad sign right there. So it's definitely, we definitely need to expand the area that we've got to work with, that the police department has to work with, and then we can't do that without cramping these guys, and they need some kind of rearrangement or a redo on their space as well. So I think it's definitely needed. I think we should definitely push this on through city council, get this analysis done. But I think we're going to find out, just to give you guys a little prognostication here, that we need to use some other area in the city if they can't use the land that we're on right here and redo the entire thing, new building. I think it's a really good deal, a really good thing that we, for a big project like the Gateway, did not go into any general obligation bonds or debt for the city, because then when you've got something like this that comes up, if you've got some big debt from that hanging over your head, you won't be able to get the thing financed, or you did, it cost you extra. So, yeah, I think we've made some really good news so far up to this point, and this one we definitely need to do. However, somebody in the audience may feel different.
Let's go ahead and move forward. And it's on non-consent.
On consent?
I'd say non-consent to update people for what's going on.
Sure. Thanks, Chief. Next, we have updates about the council liaisons to appointed boards and commissions.
Yes, so coming out of our council retreat in January, one of the things that we talked about was establishing council liaison positions with certain appointed commissions and committees to help improve the flow of communication and information back and forth. So following that, staff took the time to put together a formal policy that would outline roles, responsibilities, and expectations for the liaison positions that would be established for the PRT, the Sustainability Commission, and the CIP Committee. We don't have a formal liaison position to the BZA or the Planning Commission. They're more quasi-judicial and responsibilities that are called out specifically in state statute make it necessary for us to create a little bit more separation between the governing body and those boards. So that's why they were not included in this policy. And so we presented the draft policy in a work session last week and had some feedback in terms of making some minor changes to that. So those were incorporated, I believe, and then would be City Council Policy number 130. And if approved, we would anticipate then making those liaison appointments at the April 17th City Council meeting.
Laura, I just had one wordsmithing thing. I know our cover sheet explains that they're mayoral appointments, but I didn't actually see the mayoral part in the policy, but I could also be missing that. It just says appointed. I could definitely be missing it.
No, I mean, not specifically
It says
say.
appointments shall be made, so I
Okay.
didn't know if that mirrored our other language, or if we usually identify that it's by the mayor. If it's like this in all of them, I don't have a problem,
Okay.
but I was just curious.
I can revise that last sentence, so it'd be in section 1.04, and I
Yeah.
can just add that clarification. And I think I picked up, we took the Family Adoption Committee out, which had been in your draft version, and we added in the following role and responsibility, number one would be to attend meetings of the commission or committee. So thank you for highlighting that last week.
So we did take the Family Adoptions Committee out of it?
We took it out of this specific policy because but the intent would still be to make the appointments to that committee.
You know, as regular basis.
Right, it's a little bit different than it's not established by city ordinance.
Anyone have any other questions on that?
Now ready to move forward?
Probably not consent, I'm guessing, or not?
Yeah.
Consent? No?
Non-consent.
Probably not consent on that one. Cool. Next up, we have an item on position reclassifications and adoption of the final 2019 salary structure.
Yes, thank you. So you'll recall that back in 2017, we contracted with the Austin Peters Group to do a classification and compensation study, which had not been done since 2005. The final report and recommendations were implemented by the council in August of 2017, and then carried forward in terms of their specific implementation with employees in the fourth quarter of 2017. Those recommended salary ranges have carried over into 2018 and 2019. Typically, a review of the overall salary structure is conducted annually in November or December of each year and adopted by the City Council. However, based on the number of position vacancies that we had at the end of last year and the process that we were looking at realigning roles, responsibilities, we did not bring any reclassifications or recommendations to adjust the overall salary structure at that time. This evening's request really just deals with reclassifications. We'll deal with that salary structure request more formally as we go through this budget process. So I don't know, I'll run through quickly the recommended reclassifications that are included in the memo in your packet. I also would anticipate, I haven't seen the department requests for the 2020 budget, but I suspect that there will be maybe some additional requests for positions or other changes that come forward. So again, we'll reevaluate those, but we wanted to bring these forward because as we've talked about and been reporting at, we're making significant progress on getting those vacant positions filled, and we wanted to be as clear and have these things in place as that occurred. So the recommendations for reclassification at this point would include the assistant to the city administrator. So in 2018, we brought forward a request to modify the public information officer's position, reclassified it as an assistant to the city administrator. At that time, we left it in the same salary grade. So at this point, as we've looked at spreading out roles and responsibilities, we are recommending reclassification from a grade 21 to a grade 23, driven primarily by the fact that the position will now supervise the payroll and benefits specialist and kind of the overall HR function of the city. The HR specialist position, we're requesting a reclassification from a grade 17 to a grade 15, so an actual reduction in grade, and that was based on really looking at the turnover that we've had in that position and narrowing the focus and the area of responsibility and what we were looking for. Previously, the position had a much wider array of HR functions and responsibilities, and those have been narrowed down, some of which have been kicked up to the assistant to the city administrator position. Public Works Superintendent, we've spent a lot of time evaluating the Public Works Department in general with the vacancy in the director's position. Based on what we believe the organizational needs, goals, and objectives are, we're recommending that the superintendent's position be reclassified from grade 21 to 23 as a result of assuming more responsibility for capital project planning, actual project implementation and management, and really allowing the director's position to focus more on strategic planning asset inventories, the development of those longer range plans for us. Community Development Coordinator, we looked at with the transition of James Gorham out of the Neighborhood Services Officer's position. We're recommending that we reclassify one of those positions to Community Development Coordinator, moving from a grade 14 to 16. The position would provide support to the building official's position, and including having a lot of contact with our permitting processes. So that those are responsibilities that have been assumed by that position with some of the vacancies that we've had, and we think that it makes more sense to keep some of those responsibilities centralized and provide support to that building officials. The position would also keep the responsibilities for administration of the rental licensing program, administration of the solid waste contract, and the city's rebate and assistance programs. And at peak times, it could be assigned to be out in the field looking at code enforcement and property maintenance. So historically, over time, that the function of code enforcement and neighborhood services has evolved quite a bit, and specifically the time that I've been here. We've gone from one person in the field, or a part-time person in the field, to one person in the field, to two people with some level of field responsibility and some level of office responsibility. Our hope with this reclassification, and our goal with this reclassification, is to really, with the position that we're now hiring for, the expectation is that the majority of that person's time will be spent in the field. So there's not going to be this sharing of the office work. One person is going to be much more field-oriented, and the other will handle the assistance programs and some of the permitting. And that's the way in which we're recruiting for that position. The next reclassification is for the building official. That position was formally created and introduced in the 2019 budget, so this just brings it into our official salary structure, recommended at a grade 23. So when we went through the classification and compensation process, we were already contemplating the need for this position. So we had the Austin Peters group look at the appropriate placement in the range, and that's where that landed. The building official, I would note too, is that that is a position that will be in the field quite a bit. So one of the things that our neighborhood services officers watch for in the field are construction projects that may be occurring without permits. And some of that, the building official will also be in the field and have a set of eyes and have some responsibility for that. So that, I think, was an important distinction, and I believe the HR specialist, I will note, started today, was her first day, and the building official is slated to start April 15th. So, and then in Parks and Recreation, currently we've got a position that is classified as an office assistant at grade 11 that has primarily been maintaining and processing issues related to memberships at the community center. The plan is to expand those responsibilities to be memberships at the community center and the outdoor pool, as well as taking on supervisory responsibility and training of the entry desk and reception staff at the center. And then in the police department, it's just the formal introduction of the community service officer's position that was approved in the 2019 budget into our salary structure. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Question. Laura, just in terms of nomenclature, the term coordinator, I've been told is not a good term for a position. And that maybe you might think about some alternative, like manager or something like that instead of coordinator. That's just,
okay.
You might talk to the folks in HR and see if they have any similar views of that term.
Yeah, I had questions about the building official classification. I know you said that was what the consultant had recommended. I was curious, first, when we previously had a full city planner, what that classification was?
23.
And so this is now downgraded responsibilities, or just different responsibilities?
Completely different set of responsibilities.
But
so
there's
Brian,
no management and things or are they comparable even though different? It just seemed like this one was high compared to the other positions that are at level 23 that have, management responsibilities and
It's
things
the
like that.
skill set. You're hiring somebody that technically they're not an engineer, but they almost have those engineering skills.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that's what the market's demanding right now for that position. My intention is to have the building official supervise the community development coordinator, since those two be working so closely in the office.
So would it be the building official that looks, as we're doing rebuilds, that would look at the plans schematic and, okay.
So like I've got a builder right now, came in today with a set of plans for a lot split that was approved about a year ago, no, actually in December. I actually had two. One was approved a year ago, one was approved in December from Maple. Two different builders are coming in with plans. My intention is to give those plans to the building official. Make comments on them, review them, hand them back with comments, review them again. And then when it's time to actually go out and do the inspection, we'll go out and do the inspection.
And so this will be a dial back of our relationship with IBTS.
Well, we're not gonna, yeah.
Not a complete replacement, but it will allow us to scale back the work that's being done with
We
IBTS.
still need to kind of figure out balance of workloads and so forth, but eventually, scale back IBTS, kind of wean ourselves off of them, especially when the workload kind of dies down a little bit, which it inevitably will. Yeah, that's the intention.
And then who, if anyone, has or will continue to pick up sort of that more city planning, like visioning process that you might get with the planner as opposed to this new position?
I'm doing that right now.
Okay.
Laura talked about positions in the budget.
That might be coming back to
That
us.
might be coming back
to
to
us. So,
Okay, and that's part of their responsibility. I mean, Brian as the assistant has had HR and planning and development and finance, and it's too much.
Right.
And so part of that is shifting.
Enthusiastic nods from Brian.
Right, shifting some of that so that there's more time for him to be able to focus on some of those bigger pieces and processes.
Thanks for sticking it out.
a few times I wanted to go to Laura's office and throw the keys on the desk and see ya.
Let's go, we'll be looking at it then.
Mayor, if we could, I know in your previous life, you've been involved in things like this, and were you involved with admin here and helping them work this stuff out, or is this all done by them?
Well, Laura, in consulting with our HR consultant, Austin Peters. Then she brought that to me and said, here's kind of what we're thinking, and then yes. And then we talked about it, and this is the plan we come up with.
A lot of this came out of the classification and compensation study.
Well, and it's trying to streamline, to be more efficient. When you're hiring, like the HR position, HR and payroll, it was a difficult hire, streaming payroll back down. You can find a payroll person, but a payroll and HR person is kind of difficult. So then Emily gets to take on some of the HR function, and we get somebody dedicated to payroll. So, and then we have people, the community service people. You gotta have. We want somebody in the field. We want eyes in the field. I do anyway. I want eyes in the field. I want them working the streets. Because I always ask Laura, how come we have this, temporary sign?
There's a temporary sign.
Temporary sign, Mohawk. Again, the Windows people again.
Right.
And so I'm thinking that, in my opinion, there should be more eyes in the street.
Sure.
And so maybe it makes more sense. Someone who wants to be in the field. There are field people and there's office people. And I think in this case, you're going to hire a field person, someone who wants to be in the field. They want to be outside.
Yes.
And then you have someone in the office who's going to, do those particular file, of our recurring codes violations people. Someone back who's going to be, handling the paperwork kind of things. And so hopefully that will make it more efficient, because you went to the two kind of half in, half out, and that doesn't. So yeah, so we talked about different scenarios. How can we streamline it? And the other thing we want, Emily, was promoted to the assistant to the city administrator. Kind of flattening it out a little bit, getting some of the things off Laura, delegating more, getting things more out, giving people opportunities, giving them a chance to grow. So this is all kind of wrapped up in
Yeah, cool.
So based on the positions that we're looking at here, do we have enough space based on the current configuration to house everybody here?
Yes. Everybody on this list, anybody who might be on a new list,
For our new budget list.
perhaps not. Yes, we have spaces, and we've done, you'll see if you kind of go through, we've reorganized, so we moved the HR office back on that side and brought the building official up a little bit closer. We're gonna move Nilo over. We're gonna keep this half door closed. That Dutch door does not do any of us any favors. We're gonna try to direct people more clearly to this one open window and have someone, the office assistant position that we're also currently recruiting for will be there and be able to sort of meet and greet. I know that's a concern that Pat has raised in the past about how unwelcoming it feels sometimes.
The last couple,
Right.
every time I come in, I check it out.
Yes.
The last couple times I came in there the day, it's like, there's nobody there to.
Right. And so that our hope is by keeping that first door closed and then that office assistant will sit and be very, prominently there. You're not having somebody in front of that open window that was out in the field 50% of the time. So I think.
Neon sign there, check in here.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
as I explained to Laura, I really want community development to be a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
So if you have something to do with the city, you come to that window right out here,
Right.
whether it's a business license, or plans to be reviewed, or a zoning question, or right-of-way permit to be pulled.
Building permit.
Public
Yeah, instead of going here, there, and somewhere else, we'll take care of everything right there.
I
Send
like
you on
it.
your way.
The other piece of this too is, as we're trying to hire people, and as we either have success or don't have success in the marketplace, we have to look at our grades to make sure, are we attracting, is our position attractive enough to attract the people with the skills we need in the city? And the building official, we have not had luck. And so you do have to adjust, up, down, and try to keep some semblance of attractiveness.
Yeah. Of course, if it comes to paving a road or giving Emily a raise, I vote for Emily.
Hey,
Nick, I
sorry,
think
Brent.
you could move this.
It hurts.
It hurts.
Consent, okay.
Great. Next up, we have some revisions to City Council Policy number 111.
So last time we brought declaration of surplus property forward, the mayor pointed out that we had some language in council policy 111 that we weren't actually following, was probably outdated and antiquated, and he was absolutely correct. So our goal was the next time we had a surplus item coming forward that we would also bring forward council policy 111 for you to consider that. Very briefly, the piece that was, red line. The piece that was probably the most inconsistent with our current practice was section 1.05, but we are recommending just some clarification language in 104. We don't really create a calendar of sale because we used to bring an auctioneer in. We used to stockpile items and we'd literally bring an auctioneer in, and then you might sell something for pennies, literally pennies on the dollar. So we used that calendar of sale language made sense then. So we tried to clarify that and then just change some titles to match up. And so we have included here where 105 said that we would be including a one-week classified ad in the Kansas City Star and the Johnson County Sun, which the Johnson County Sun no longer exists, and a week's classified ad in the Kansas City Star would probably cost more than whatever it is that we're surplusing. We have moved, as technology has evolved, we have really moved to having the greatest life on Purple Wave, and so we just revised 104 to indicate that the department head and the finance director will determine the best means for advertising that and selling that property. And then in 105, I think, again, what we wanted to do, and I think we want to maintain the flexibility, we dialed that back to deal only with the disposition of real property. So real estate that the city would own, We've accounted for personal property in 1.04, and then we've just given ourselves the flexibility, which is what we would want to do, to determine sale or disposal on a case-by-case basis. So that doesn't preclude a land swap or a trade or, hiring a broker, but every time we would be making a decision with real property that we owned, we would come and we would have that conversation and make that decision rather than prescribing a blanket method for disposing of real property.
Move on consent.
I understand that this means that Councilmember Quinn and I won't be able to get in the bidding war on the next skid steer that...
That's true. We didn't change that. We do still preclude officials and employees from partaking in any of our surplus equipment.
That's great.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, somewhat related to that, we have an item to declare some of our surplus property. Scott, go ahead.
Below to that, we have one primary item tonight to dispose of, and that is a Chevrolet Tahoe Patrol Car 2012. This vehicle was involved in an accident recently, pretty severe accident where somebody rear-ended it. So the car, contacted the insurance company, they came out and looked at it, and they totaled the car. So by formally disposing of it, I can now sign over the title to them and get reimbursed. They have valued the car at $13,600.
You're not gonna sell the parts?
We'll take the radio out, because the radio still works, it's still salvageable.
That's it?
Yep.
Good.
That's it.
Consent. Yeah.
Great. Last, we have a discussion item for
Yep, really just a reminder that by city code, at our meeting on the 17th, we will be electing council president and vice president. Just printed a copy of that code section for your reference, kind of looking at roles, responsibilities, how that happens. So typically what we have done is we've not, just kind of made sure it's on everybody's radar screen at this meeting, so that you're prepared to come into the meeting on the 17th with nominations. And what our practice has been is that we'll start with council president. The mayor will open up the floor and take any and all nominations, and then we have voted on those nominations in the order in which they were made. And then once we select the council president, we will move on to select the council vice president in the same way. And, so those are done in April of odd-numbered years for a 2-year term.
Are there any questions on that? No. If not, are there any other department updates?
I don't think so.
All right, well, I think we can go ahead and adjourn our finance administration.
Can I just say something? It's a reminder, because we won't meet again until after the Rushton auction, which you should have gotten a card on. It's on April 12th, Friday, at the community center. And the city will be providing, Nilo and Emily have pulled some stuff together. I'm putting baskets together. This one on mission gear and attire, and I have a couple things at home that's going to go. And then I'm going to do one on movie night. So that's one of our schools, so please come if you can.
Just received,
Mike
just
emailed
dropped it
today.
off
Okay, all right.
today or
Okay.
yesterday.
They didn't give you one,
Okay.